I founded my mentorship back in 2015. Prior to that, I spent about 7 or 8 years working in the public school system in colleges, teaching animation and illustration, 2D and 3D. And as much as it was and continues to be a great memory where I got a chance to work with amazing colleagues and worked with incredibly talented students and made some very dear friends who I really deeply respect, I don't think it's unfair of me to say that there's a lot about artistic education that doesn't work. And it hasn't worked for a very long time, that I still see to this day flaws in the educational system that I lived through myself when I was in college and university studying these things myself. But 25 years later, seeing my daughter, who's also now a professionally trained illustrator, go through exactly the same thing. It has not evolved one bit. Thankfully, one of the things that I find very exciting about the educational world that we live in about art education is that it's become a lot more affordable. That a lot of this education has been consolidated to seasoned professionals like Anthony Jones or Clinton Diana Kearley or Tyler Edlin or Hardy Fowler or Ahmed Aldoori, all of these different artists who have their own unique specialties and who are really greatly improving the quality of education and making it a lot more affordable. There's some people out there, there's certain organizations, there's certain institutions, either public or private or online, where I feel, as a very, very passionate educator, in fact, I would say that I feel more passionate about teaching than I do about art itself. And I don't consider that a hot take. To me, I teach 24 hours a day, any chance I get, even at the protest of my children who tell me to shut up, I didn't ask, I just want to know where the damn remote is. I don't care about how batteries work. I'm the type of guy who just love to teach. It's a compulsion of mine. It's just something that I really do feel I found my calling. But that comes with a bit of a character weakness of mine, and that is I get very touchy about bad teaching. I'm very sensitive to what actually empowers an artist, what actually empowers somebody, and what can ultimately waste a person's time. Thankfully, none of the artists that I mentioned today fall into that category. You really do have access to some of the best teachers out there, teachers and artists who have industry experience. So what I want to empower you today, whether you're a beginner or professional, is how to make a distinction between a teacher that can actually help your career grow and help your skills grow, and people who I feel might not be ready to teach, although they do. People that might just be artists or institutions, but they don't actually understand what translates from education to a professional skill that can actually get you the jobs. There's a very thick line between that. So I want to start by mentioning something very, very important before I continue. And that's the fact that from my experience teaching thousands of students and working with many, many different teachers in public schools, or having a chance to talk with and share my thoughts and feelings about education with many of the online artists that you know out there, I can say most of the time, the large majority of the time, when education fails, that has nothing to do with bad teachers or bad students. I've never known a teacher who walked into the educational system, as not just as a side hobby, but as somebody who really wanted to be a professional teacher, who didn't deeply care for their students, that didn't feel like they really, really cared and would go out of their way to help students. Teachers care. And all of the teachers that I've spoken to online, I just had a Zoom call with my friend Tyler Edlin, and I just listened to this guy, how much he cares about the value he brings people. The same will go for students. I mean, I've taught thousands and thousands of students, not just in my mentorship, but outside of that mentorship. And I don't think there's a single student I've ever taught that is inherently lazy. I don't think laziness or a lack of interest or a lack of desire really is the main obstacle that comes between an artist and their artistic growth and their professional growth, despite the fact that they might blame themselves for being lazy. Regardless, It's amazing how myself, when I finished college and university, after all that artistic education, and how many of the students that I've worked with over the years that I've noticed when they've gone through these educational systems, despite everybody's intentions, how I and so many other artists out there walked out the other end of it feeling just as confused and lost as always. And that's at the foundation of what I want to talk about today. What is it about artistic education, for good intention or not, leaves so many artists feeling unfulfilled, feeling like, okay, I spent all this money, I spent all of these years, I've done all of this work. What next? And I think the first thing is that a lot of schools out there teach information, but they don't teach integration. I don't think students in general struggle with information if it's presented to them clearly, if it's presented to them in a professional and organized manner. But a lot of schools out there, a lot of art schools, will just dump information on a student and say, these are the fundamentals, this is the work, this is what needs to be done, and then completely turns around and they go and turn on their TV and feel like they've done their job and they can zone out for the rest of the day. And you leave that responsibility of just filtering through all of this information and applying it in whichever way they see fit, because they're not necessarily given guidance on how to apply this information. And they learn it, and they do the tests, and they complete the assignments. But then what? What comes after that? And that's the question that's very often not answered. Okay, I have these artistic skills. Okay, I have these artistic fundamentals, but how does that translate into actually getting a job? What kind of job actually takes advantage of these fundamentals? What fundamentals am I strong at? Am I proficient at something? Do I have a certain style or an approach towards my work that makes me compatible with certain types of work? And if I do, how do I present that work in this different environment that will maximize the response, that will leave the best impression with an employer or a client? That's never answered. So we dump that information on the student's shoulder. They churn through that information, and then we shove them out the door and wish them good luck. And when I found myself in that position after I'd finished college, 7-8 years of professional education and thousands of assignments and hundreds of hours of work, and I had no clue what to do with that. And it took me a good 10-12 years of trial and error and beating my head against the wall and a lot of wasted effort before it started to dawn on me what I was doing wrong in the first place. And then I finally got insight from friends, from colleagues, from feedback from professional studios that made me realize, holy shit, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. And I look back at my education, I look back at the institutions that I learned at growing up, and I thought to myself, you could have told me that 12 years ago. Why didn't you? Well, it's because you were just regurgitating information, but you weren't telling me, the student, what to do about it. When you know what the reward is for the work, personally and or professionally, that's a very strong driving force towards doing it in the first place. But there's nothing more exhausting than just being told to do something over and over and over again. Being told that fundamental is what you need to learn when you don't know why. Now, something else that I experienced in colleges, and it was no fault of the college at all, it was just a fault of the system itself. And I've mentioned this on my channel before. There's so many artists that I met, and I can see their faces, I can see their artwork, that were incredibly talented and just had a certain special gift, that what they produced and how they saw the world and how they presented this information was so magnificent, and it was so unique, which is awesome. An artist with a compelling and powerful style of art, but also has a very unique form of artistic self-expression, is I would imagine what a lot of us artists strive for, to have that identity, to have that style that really, really stands out. But that style was not necessarily compatible with the educational system, with the industry that they were supposedly training for. And what that left them feeling very often was that they weren't as competent as others. They didn't have the skill because so-and-so in my class has a style that's much more commercially appealing. It's, the way they animate and the way they move things, the way they draw characters is just so stylized and catchy. It's much more clickbaity. Mine's not like that at all. I'm much more introverted in my style. My style is very unique. It almost borderlines on fine art in that sense. And they're in a class with another 20 to 40 other students. When they can't get that personalized attention, when they're working with a teaching institution, an educational institution that doesn't have the time to recognize their unique style, then they very often just feel like they don't fit in. And because they can't find where they fit in, very, very sadly, they drop out. And this is one of the big problems with education very often, everywhere. It's kind of this one-size-fits-all approach. And when you're somebody like me who grew up with fine artist parents, who studied animation and illustration, he worked in video games, he did book illustrations, he's worked in fantasy stuff. I've done all of these, I've kind of chanced to touch on all these different artistic styles. There are as many diverse artists as there are art forms in and of themselves. Artists are incredibly unique. Artists generally tend to be anomalies to society, and very often anomalies to other artists as well. And it's extremely important, I feel, it's very important moving forward that more and more diverse styles of teacher start to present themselves online. I don't think that the traditional public school system is equipped or prepared to be able to offer this personalization of service to particular artists. But I personally believe that this is necessary. That's why I knew back in 2015 when I started my mentorship, I wanted to be able to offer that same quality of education as did the great masters like Leonardo da Vinci, working master and apprentice, working with one-on-one, where that teacher had unique skills that were relevant to that unique artist, and that teacher had the time and energy to be able to dedicate it to that one person or maybe a tiny class of people. But the moment you make it 5, 10, 15 students, you lose that power. As a result of that lack of personalized feedback, things start to stagnate. Artists start to feel like, okay, I'm going through the drills, I'm drawing the 500 hands, I'm drawing the 5,000 faces. Okay, I've learned to do rotations of the skull. Okay, I've learned perspective and I've learned three-dimensional forms. Okay, I know about values and color and composition. What now? And because they can't get that personalized feedback on where to go with it, that's where the education stops. And because there's a lack of feedback, that artist slowly but surely starts to stagnate, starts to slow down, starts to feel like, okay, I'm doing the same stupid exercises, I'm not feeling the gains. What am I doing with all of this crap? It's kind of, imagine watching the movie Karate Kid, if you're old enough to remember the Karate Kid back in the day. Mr. Miyagi teaches Daniel, he's supposed to be teaching him karate, but instead he teaches him how to sand the floors and teaches him how to paint the fence and teaches him how to wax the cars. And he just has them going through these motions over and 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 over again until he sands his entire Japanese garden. He polishes all the cars in his driveway. And at a certain point, Daniel just turns around and says, okay, I'm done with this. You've had me clean all your cars and paint your fences and sand your floors. I am done with this. I'm not doing this anymore. Imagine if you're watching the movie Karate Kid. Daniel takes his crap and he throws it on the ground. He goes, screw you, Mr. Miyagi, and he walks out, and then the credits roll. It wouldn't be a very memorable or enjoyable film, would it? No. What happens in that moment? Mr. Miyagi says, Daniel-san, come here. Right? And he pulls him back and he says, show me sand the floor. And he goes like this and goes, Aich! And he goes and he punches and he realizes the sand floor was actually him learning how to block and learning how to punch Okay? He realized that all of that effort actually resulted in having incredible muscle memory and strength to be able to defend himself and to fight. He was actually learning something. And it's at that moment in that movie where Daniel goes, holy shit, I know karate. Well, what education very often does is it tells you to sand the floors, it tells you to paint the fences, it tells you to wax all of those cars. And then once you're done, you turn to the institution, you say, what next? And they say, no, that's it. Take care. Good luck. Oh, so I paid you all this money and I did all of this work and you're just taking it and running with it. Yep. My answer to that is absolutely no. It's a teacher's responsibility. It should be an institution's responsibility to say, okay, now let me show you how to fight. Let me show you how to get a job. Let me show you how to market yourself. Let me show you how to build your portfolio. That's when an artist realizes they have that cathartic, that satisfying moment of saying, all of that hard work has paid off and I have something very valuable to show for it. As well, the drawback to that can be that artists will just continue to learn in isolation, that they just learn from YouTube videos and buying Gumroads, which are all absolutely fantastic sources of learning. But if they're not getting that personalized feedback, they just feel like they're depending on themselves to be able to gauge their own professional skill without that professional experience. And that, again, doesn't pay off. You need to be able to speak to somebody like Clint or Diana Keeley, who've been working for Magic the Gathering for many years and can say, if you want to get that job, this is what's expected of you. You want to be able to talk to somebody like Tyler Enlund, who's been doing professional background illustrations for video games for years, and be able to say, if you want to get a job doing environment design, this is what's expected of you. You need to be able to get that personalized feedback. That's what's important. Otherwise, you're just alone in your room, getting good, and having absolutely no idea how to get any attention with it. So when it comes to artistic education, what does an artist need to feel fulfilled and satisfied and find growth? For long-term growth, the first thing that artists need is personalized feedback, not generic feedback. It's up to the teacher to recognize that artist's unique skills, make sure that the teacher is a good pair with that artist, a teacher who can actually recognize that artist's particular skills and offer them that personalized feedback. Second, that feedback needs to be in context with the job that they're pursuing. Getting good doesn't mean anything. Just because I'm a handy person doesn't mean I can fix your floors. No, in order to fix your floors, I need to know that the tool that I have in my toolbox pertains to the job, to the home renovation that I want to do. I don't give a crap if you can pave my driveway. I'm looking for somebody to fix my pipes. So education needs to be contextual and personalized to that individual artist. Third, we need to be accountable. I would say that one of the most powerful tools, if you're somebody who really struggles to motivate yourself artistically, my opinion is you're struggling to find motivation because you're not accountable for what you do. If I don't do anything, who cares? It's not going to affect anybody's life. So a teacher should always help an artist feel accountable. If you're teaching, don't just spew random information at them. No, we have an assignment that needs to get done. It needs to live up to a certain standard. And when we sit down together, we're going to go over that together. Now that you know what's expected of you, you sit down with that professional teacher, and that teacher is going to show you, this is where you did a good job, and these are the things you need to fix. If you want to be taken seriously as a professional, you're accountable for having to be able to do those things. Otherwise, no director is ever going to take you seriously. And lastly, and certainly not least, a sense of direction. Your personal style, the type of career you want to pursue, the type of career that you're compatible with, where your unique personality fits into a different type of job. Those are things I talk about on my channel all the time. So by having a solid sense of direction, you know that you can help that artist discover and adhere themselves to a path that's going to get them from point A to point B in as straight a line as possible. You don't want artists to spend years of their life or even decades of their life aimlessly trying to get good without knowing where to go with it. It's exhausting, it's discouraging, and that's very often why I end up sitting down with artists or having consultations with artists that are in their 30s, 40s, sometimes even 50s, and they look jaded. They look like people who've been through a very bad divorce with their art career. They just have bags under their eyes and they're exhausted and they don't know what the hell they're doing with themselves despite having this incredible skill. I think that it's time for teachers to hold educational institutions accountable for the quality of their education. And the fact that between when I studied in college university and when my daughter did 25 years later, the fact that that much changed is no longer acceptable. With that said, this week's Polish phrase of the day is not from me, it's from listener at Kubamirocha7711, a Polish listener. And the expression was od ogółu do szczegółu, which means from general to specific, which is a very powerful lesson, right? Something that I learned as well as an artist. Work big, look at the big picture, and then break this down into specifics. Sound good? With that said, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.